Awesome. Good stuff. That's all the reading. It's my pleasure now to introduce our speaker. Visited with him for a little bit before the meeting, so I cheated, but he's gonna bring it tonight. Glen from South Carolina. Come on and tell us how it is.
Recording in progress.
I'm Glen Dehart. I'm a recovered alcoholic. And I say the recovered thing because all the guys in my lineage do that. And I do say it because when I got here both times, in 2001 and then again here in 2022, I was in a hopeless state of mind and body. The suicide plan was in place and I didn't want to be here anymore. My sponsor is Dave Fredrickson. I have a home group, the Aiken Mad Dogs, and my sobriety date is February 7th, 2022. This is my second trip around the block with this thing. And I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on what it was like in qualification, but I will point out a couple of things. Very early, when my dad left us, I think I was 6 or 7 years old, he was like this hero to me. I mean, he was, some of y'all are old enough to remember this TV show called The White Shadow. He was a college basketball coach. Well, this was my dad. And when he left, I started changing behavior, manipulating how I dressed, acted, talked around people to make you see me in a certain way so that I would be accepted. And that carried on over into, God, everything I think I did all of my life, including until today. One of my biggest fears after doing this inventory again this time was this fear of what I think you think about me. The reason I mentioned that guy Harold earlier is because I heard him say it on a talk and I'd never heard it said this way. He said, I suffered from the delusion of inequality since I was a very young kid. But at the same time, don't tell me what to do or don't tell me what not to do, or I'm going to do it different. And I carried that attitude into everything. I started drinking and using when I was 13 years old. It started off with marijuana for me. And then at 16, alcohol became involved. And the very first time that happened, the fear melted away. All of that anxiety melted away. I was able to breathe for the first time. The same thing happened to me with the first time I did opioids. And I have battled those addictions until I got to Alcoholics Anonymous. I always felt like I was a little bit apart from and a little bit different from, unless I was drinking or using. And it didn't matter what it was. You know, my addiction and alcoholism, it was alcohol and drugs were my solution. They were not my problem. They caused a hell of a lot of problems, but they were the thing that made me feel like I was okay in life. And for me, it was a constant, manipulation of all these chemicals to try to find this sweet spot where I was okay. And it never damn worked. You know, I would get there for a little while and then I'd either always overshoot the mark with whatever I was doing. In 1999, I went to my first little treatment thing and I slid my license through and I had some guys that were dropping me off because I was done. I was ready to quit forever. And I looked down the hallway and there was a guy dragging an IV in a gown. And I said, no, that's not for me. And so we went back home. I ended up back there about a year later, candidate for the gown and the IV and the slippers and all of that stuff. And I stayed 5 days. And that was my first real try. Couldn't hear anything that anybody was saying to me. But I came back to Aiken and it took probably a year. I don't know, 2001. Like I said, the suicide plan was in place. I had moved to South Florida. I tried the geographic change. I tried all the other stuff. And when I finally got done, I went to a place in Columbia here called Three Rivers. And I was broken enough to hear what people were saying. You know, there's some guys in there and brought the message and I heard what they were saying. And I jokingly say that I spent thousands and thousands of dollars for them to tell me to go to AA. And it was the best money I ever spent because I went to AA. You know, I went the very next day. And I pulled up there at 123 Linden Street. It was a clubhouse in Aiken. And there were some crazy people there, and I didn't know if I fit in. And finally, I sat in a meeting and I heard a guy talk, and he told a little bit of my story, and he had some peace in his life, and that's what I wanted. So I grabbed him and got him to take me through the work. He wasn't a step guy, he wasn't a book guy, but I was so willing to do it, and I was hearing enough of it that I had a. It's kind of crazy. I had a boat, and he liked to fish, so I would get him out on the water, and we would work steps. And he introduced me to a lot of cool stuff. He introduced me to Richard Bach and Eckhart Tolle and all of this spiritual stuff. And we went through the work, and I did the best I could at the time, looking back, but I did not tell everything. I kept a couple of. I told him in a roundabout way, in 4. I wrote them down, and then I told him in 5, and I did not make all my amends. I did not carry. I started that process, and I got unbelievable freedom from it. And then I just kind of hit the pause button and stopped with it. My life got really good. I was committed 100% to God and Alcoholics Anonymous, and I had a couple of relationships early. I'm sorry, David, I'm gonna talk about it, just 2 or 3 relationships real quick. But what I did was I realized I got told that I had a Christian girlfriend, which didn't work out. I had an AA girlfriend, and one of the guys in my network at the time came to me and said, "Dude, you are causing harm." And I said, "What do you mean?" We agreed this was not, we don't want to. He said, "You're causing harm." And I said, "Okay," and I backed out of that, and I really started going to God with this thing. And I didn't know what I was doing, but what I was doing was a relationship, a sex ideal. I told God, hear me telling God, I asked God that if he wanted me to be in a relationship, would he just put somebody in my life? And here's my list. And I gave him a list of like 13 things. And it was, it was well-intentioned. It was, I want to be attracted physically. I want to be compatible spiritually, emotionally, and mentally, because I had a big problem with God when I got to Alcoholics Anonymous. Through a bunch of church stuff, I just couldn't hear it. And God put this woman in my life. The only thing that wasn't on the list was I didn't say no kids. I was 33 at the time, and I got 2 kids. I got a 6-year-old and an 11-year-old to raise, and there's some of they're the most beautiful things in my life today. My youngest daughter, who's 28 now, is a blackout drinker, and she has been since she was 17. So I'm a card-carrying member of the Al-Anon Fellowship as well. My life changed so dramatically in those couple of years when I was all about AA and God and the kids. That Sharon and I got married in 2004, and I got sober there in 2001. We got married in 2004, and we'd been together for a year and a half, 2 years before that. And the good stuff started happening. The job, I started a new business. The money came that I had never really had before. We took a big loan and started building these big houses in these new neighborhoods and selling them, and all of this stuff, this good stuff, these gifts of AA started, right? And my dependence shifted somewhere in that first few years to back to Glen and off of God. And I didn't even realize it was happening because I didn't have a solid network of recovery. I made a lot of meetings. David and I were talking about this before the meeting. I kind of got introduced to this meeting makers make it, 90 meetings in 90 days. Take what you like and leave the rest bullshit that is just not what AA is about. And I was there were a couple of thumpers in the room, and I fell into that other group, and I kind of, don't go away, those AA Nazis, those big book Nazis. And that's what I am today. after a long time, but it hurt me, in the beginning. And I'm not saying it's anybody's fault. There were a lot of well-intentioned people, and I had a big book, and I could have read it, and I didn't. I wasn't all the way in. As a result of that, I'm gonna say I'm gonna have to skip over a lot of stuff. Other than my life was really good, I just had no idea how untreated I was for a long time. I could tolerate a lot of internal discomfort then. What I see now and I know now is I had no step three. Step three was out the window. If you guys would just do what I wanted you to do, everything would be okay. And I lived under that for a long time. So at 9 years, my sponsor died, and I'm praying. Hang on. At 9 years, I was so uncomfortable in my skin, sober, going to meetings, that I started going to psychiatrists. My daughter we sent her to 4 or 5 different people, and she no, that's not true. That's a lie. We sent her to 2 or 3 people, and she got on Effexor, and it changed her. She needs that, right? And I thought that I could go. I was looking for a chemical solution to a spiritual problem that I didn't even realize what I was in the middle of. And I got on a lot of these things, and none of them worked. I think I tried 4 or 5 of them. I think it was Lexapro, Prozac, Prestique, and some of them even made me violently ill. I do remember going into meetings at the time and vomiting my problems. And I never forget this one time, this lady that after the meeting, she came up to me and she said, "Why don't you try this?" She had a sheet of paper. And it was a Joe and Charlie 4-step inventory. And I said, I did that 9 or 10 years ago. I couldn't see that was the issue. That was the problem. Life stayed pretty good on the outside. On the inside, it was a different story. Page 52, I was all in that. I wasn't of use to anybody except me. Migraine headaches were back. Let me throw this in there real quick too. I started taking Xanax somewhere in that 5 to 7 year range for these migraines. And I couldn't see at the time that the big stressor, the big trigger to these migraines was my untreated alcoholism. It was a stress and anxiety that was self-produced. And somewhere in there, I started using that stuff, not for the migraines, but to treat the spiritual malady. And so I say 16 years. I don't know how many years it was really. I know that again, at 16 years, I was so damn miserable in my head that the thought came, and immediately it was supplanted by, that could never happen to you. You've been sober for all these years. And that started that first thing. It was going to the doctor. It was pain medication. That's what kicked off the whole relapse. And I disappeared from life again. I'm there. I'm here physically. I'm making money for my wife, but I'm just completely gone. I checked out mentally, emotionally, spiritually. It was about 2 years into that thing that I'm buying drugs off of the street again. I'm drinking again, and I'm hiding it. This was in 2017 that happened. In 2018, we sold another big house, and we got a bunch of money, and we went and bought this property out in the middle of nowhere. And because I want to isolate now, I want to get away from everybody. And Lord, the next couple of years, I started trying to come back to AA. The relapse started in 2017 and 2019, early. I ran into this guy who was later to become my sponsor. and he introduced me to. I told him where I was at. I drove into this little diner. I wasn't going there. This is a God thing. I'm going to McDonald's. It's raining. I'm thinking about killing myself. My truck just turns into this little diner, and when I walk through the door, I see this guy that's a hardcore big book thumper from Massachusetts, and I do not like him. And I went right on past and sat at the back with my back to the wall facing out. And when he got done eating, he came over to me and he said these three little words that just made me start sobbing. He said, "How you doing?" And I came unglued, and I told him everything that was going on. And he asked me, he said, "All right, dude, come outside." We talked for a little bit, and he said, "I want you to come to this Mad Dog men's meeting. We meet on Mondays and Thursdays, I think, at the time." And I said, "Okay." And I started that journey of trying to come back. That was in early 2019. I think I lived under this illusion that if I ever did relapse, I could come back to Alcoholics Anonymous and do the things I did the first time, and I could get sober again. And it was not happening. The obsession would not go away. I would come in and I'm doing everything he tells me to do. I'm reading the book. I'm writing inventory. I'm showing up for every meeting. And I can remember standing outside in the parking lot of these restaurants we'd go eat at, just bawling because it won't go away. I cannot stop using and I cannot stop drinking. And it got right back to the point. And he's given me these. Let me say this, because this is where Josh and Ross kind of came into this thing. He's turned me on to this Mad Dog recovery stuff, and I'm listening to Bob Darrell and Mark Houston and Chris Raymer, and I want to do that more than anything in the world, and I can't do it. I'm driving my tractor, listening to these tapes, knowing this is the truth, and I have a lot of belief in God, but I have zero access to God. It's just not happening. And so it's that whole head full of AA, belly full of beer, body full of drugs. The most miserable thing in the world is knowing that the solution's out there and not being able to get it. And so finally I'm gonna push on through because I want to get to the good stuff. I get to 2022. So I've been trying to do this for 3 years, suffering. I'm begging God, my wife's begging God. She's got this deep, strong faith, and she's so frustrated with God. She's in terrible state too. And my plan is now to sell this big, beautiful farm, this big, beautiful house. I got everything now that I think I want outside of me. All the things I ever thought I wanted. I got the $1 million house, this big shop with all the toys, the boats, the ATVs. I'm in the middle of 173 acres of hunting land, which I love to do. And I want to die every day with all of the stuff that I thought I wanted. And my game plan is to sell this property, get her financially stable, and kill myself. And that's where it went. And that's where it was for the longest time. And we sold the property. We put the asking price high. I got her where she's set up, and we moved into her dad's house over here that had been sitting empty. He had passed a couple years before. And I said, I'm gonna try this one more time. One of my guys in my Mad Dog group had been to this place in it's called Waypoint. It's in Orangeburg. And I said, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna give it a shot. And by this time, not only am I drinking on a daily basis, I am doing this stuff that's killing people left and right. This heavy duty street opioid, and I'm just gone. So I said I'm gonna do it. So I want to tell you this other story later, but I get to go to Waypoint, and I get 2 weeks away from this thing, and I can't move. My body is so destroyed from what I've been through that I can't. The physical withdrawals were so horrible, and I'm listening to people sitting in process groups talking about what you do when you're triggered, and I want to throw up because I know different. I know different, and I seem like an arrogant asked to some of these people at this place, but I just know that's not where the answer is. But I stay there for 2 weeks and I come back and I get with this guy, and God did it for me. Again, it was one day at a time, and it was a bitch for months and months, but the obsession was removed. And I knew now, I've been listening to all these guys, and I knew everything had to be different in my life. So at 54 days sober, I went back to that treatment center, terrified, still horrible physical withdrawals, and I spoke. And I told them what had happened, and I look out there, and there's heads nodding, and something changed when I was talking to these people. And I finally did a honest, completely honest fourth step, fifth step. I put everything out there. I'll never forget, this is what changed my life more than anything in AA. I was going to this open meeting, and this kid came in, and I think I'm maybe 2 months or 3 months back, and he was broken down. He'd relapsed, and he'd been out for a year. And I said, dude, come to our Mad Dog men's meeting tonight. I can't sponsor you, but there are people there that can. And he didn't show up, but I went and told my sponsor what I'd said to him, and he said, Glenn, that's bullshit. He said, all you have to do is stay one page ahead of this guy in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and one step ahead of him. And it changed. Everything changed for me. And I've been listening to these tapes. I have been, Mark Houston, I've been rewinding, writing down, I'm trying to figure out how to do all this stuff. And I heard this talk from 2001. It was Dave Fredrickson and Mark Houston, Fellowship of the Spirit, and it was a 10-part workshop. And it was a deeper level of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's stuff that I just never heard. I didn't know it's all in the book, but I never had it explained this way. And this guy left his email at the end of that talk. And I was telling my buddy Chaz about it here in our group. And I said, dude, you gotta listen to this. And so Chaz is in an emotional bottom. He's 12 years sober, but he's running into people and he's in untreated stuff. And he calls Dave and gets him to be a sponsor. And so I said, great. I'm way too terrified to call this guy. I'll just get it all through you. And that lasted about 2 weeks. And finally, I got on. Well, let me back up. I'm sitting in my kitchen with COVID, and I sent a message to the administrator of this Mad Dog site, this Ross Melanson guy. And as I'm sitting there, sick as a dog with COVID, and still really in a bunch of withdrawal, my iPad rings. I didn't even know it could ring. And I would say I talked to Ross for an hour, but really I just listened to Ross for an hour because he liked to talk. And he told me he was a member of this on and on and on and on, and like Al-Anon. And but he gave me Dave's number, and I got a hold of Dave. I had been going to a couple of online Zoom meetings, and I finally got the courage up and called Dave, and I said, dude, will you take me to the work? And he said, he was in a doctor's appointment. He answered the phone. He said, absolutely, I will. Do this, 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 and this. Be at these meetings. Show up. And that started a journey. It started a journey to this whole life that I didn't even know existed in Alcoholics Anonymous. Started doing Tuesday and Saturday Zoom. I went back through the work with him, and it was a whole different deal. You know, I finally realized really all about this 4-step, that it's all about finding forgiveness for people. You know, it's about letting go of all this stuff. It's about identification of these fears so that I can then go use this fear tool, or I can use two-way prayer to get God into my life to help him, to get him to solve my problems. I can't do any of this stuff. You know, I finally came clean with another man with everything in 5, and he just the way we went through is so different. Let me back up here because I jumped around a little bit. When I was listening to Dave talk, one of the first things I heard him say that hit me was write your own 3rd step prayer. I'm like, what is he talking about? He said the 3rd step prayer in the big book was Bill's prayer. Bob had a different one. Take that template and write out what you're offering to God every day. Write out what you think God wants to build you into, write out what you're in bondage to other than selfishness. And for me, it was nicotine, it was pornography. There were all kind of things that I threw in that third step prayer in the beginning. How do I line my will up with God's, and what are my difficulties? And all of this stuff, not so you can feel better, Glenn, but so you can bear witness that God's done this in your life. And that started my trip. And then he introduced me to these 12 daily prayers, meditations, and visions. And this is one of the things I wanted to touch on because it changed my life so much. It's all of the prayers that are in the big book, right, from page 83. And I had people tell me, for years, go read 86 to the end of the chapter. This is back in the first time. And hell, I never did that much anyway. Once I started actually doing what was in the book, asking every morning for God to show me the way of patience, tolerance, kindness, and love with my wife, with my kids, with the people that I work with everybody that I come in contact with during the day, and start creating a vision. What would it look like if in all of these situations that I have struggled with, if instead of doing what I think Glenn wants, if I did what I think God wants me to do, how would it be different? And it changed my life. The very first one was, he said, think of a way that you don't show patience, tolerance, kindness, and love. And y'all might get a kick out of this, but my wife, the most beautiful soul I know, was late for every single thing in her entire life. She had a license plate at one time that said LATE, vanity plate. And she didn't mean to do it, but she just is. Me being the anal alcoholic addict that I am, I want to be on time. I want to be early for everything. Not really because I care about you, because I care about what you think about me. So what I did was I made a vision of what it would be like if, when it's 10 minutes before we have to be somewhere and she's not even close to being ready, instead of me getting aggravated and disturbed and upset, which I did so many times, I have ruined evenings because I'm mad because we're not late. If I went and sat down and prayed and called somebody in recovery and picked up that big book or did something different, and I started doing that, I started asking God to help me do that. And we've been late a lot of times in the past 2.5 years, and I hadn't been upset about it one time. It worked like phenomenally. And so then I started doing this stuff with all those other prayers, with the 10th step. I didn't even know what a 10th step was till I got back and had it introduced to me. When I go every morning and ask God to help me be on watch for all of this stuff, and when I do get upset, 6 things to do. I had no idea. I go to God immediately, ask him to remove it. I talk to somebody about it. I make amends quickly. Turn thoughts, go help somebody. And that's where the sponsorship thing comes in. I work with a lot of guys today, and it's so easy for me in the 10th step to find somebody to help. Love and tolerance is my code. I've already prayed for that in the morning to ask God to give it to me. And that last thing that I never really understood is wrap your head around and remember you've ceased fighting anything or everyone. And that always takes me back to right where I was when I got here, because I was fighting everything in my life. The third prayer, meditation, and vision is on. It's like 83, 84, 85, 86, all the way through. My goal today is to do what God wants me to do. And I set these intentions and visions every morning. It says it in the book, We're supposed to carry a vision of what God's will and is into all of our activities today. And I try to do that. I started doing this review, on the next page. When I would be jammed up, I would call these guys and they would take me to page 87. Glenn, you're not supposed to be inspired at all times, right? As time passes, as you do this work, this thinking will become more and more on this plane of inspiration. So I started doing all this stuff and incorporating it into my life. And slowly, by doing that work, by reaching out and helping other people do this work, something started happening where I'm not thinking about me all the time. for the first time in my life, through doing this 12-step work, it's not all about me anymore, and that's not something. I always thought a spiritual awakening was that the obsession was removed and gone. And that's just the very beginning of it. Once I started doing this 12-step work and helping other people, I got this purpose in life now. And I go rub shoulders with guys that, hell, it's not easy, and it's not hard to find people in these open meetings. I mean, you just go look for the guy that's sitting up against the wall that nobody's talking to. Because in most of these meetings, nobody's sponsoring anybody anyway. So I'd go and grab these guys. And before long, I'm just working with a ton of people. Now, they're not all getting it, but that's not my job anymore, right? I used to think in this first trip through that if you're going to sponsor somebody, you got to, you got to be their damn counselor and their lawyer and their banker and it's just not, man. All my job today is to put this kid of spiritual tools that Dave put at my feet, at their feet. And if they want to pick it up, great. And if they don't, it's not my responsibility. I have missed so much stuff, and I always do this. I always get off key. I want to tell you a couple of the coolest things that happened to me. When I got on with Dave and this group of guys, there was a guy that would call me. I was real nervous about being on the meeting, and he would call me every day and leave me these messages. And one of the things he would say when he was sharing in the meetings was that he got up in the morning and he prayed with his wife. And I started thinking about that. And my wife has had this unbelievable relationship with God since she was a little kid. He just put the perfect person in my life. I remember her telling me that she was sitting in church at 6 years old, and the preacher was doing the hellfire brimstone stuff. And she said she was sitting there thinking, at 6 years old, wow, I just know so much more about you, God, than he does. I feel so sorry for him. And that's the kind of person that I needed, right? And so when I was doing this, I listening to Mark, listening to Dave, doing the work, I finally was convicted one morning to go sit. She had just woke up. And I went and I said, I feel like I'm going to make this 9th step amends. My heart is pounding. And I said, baby, do you pray? And she says, I pray. And I said, will you pray with me? And oh my God, we started doing that 2.5 years ago, and it's changed everything about our relationship. Today, for a long time, I had this relationship with God, and she had this relationship, and it was separate. And now today, the best way I can describe it is, as we get closer to God together, we get closer together. And my relationship with her and my kids and everybody in my life is better than it's ever been. When my grandson was born, it's coming up on 2 years ago, 17th of September, I was just starting this work with Dave, and I went down there for that, and I was there for my family for the first time, and I wasn't trying to get and be anywhere else. When I left there, I don't know what happened to me, but that kid was born, and it really changed my life. I left Naples, Florida, and I cried from Naples, Florida to South Carolina. And it wasn't self-pity. It was gratitude. It was gratitude that I'm able to be here and be of service to other people today, and I'm not thinking about just me. This online Zoom stuff that I hated for so long when it started in 2020 or 2021 has changed my life. I have a network of men today that hold my feet to the fire. I do a meeting every Wednesday morning called Steel on Steel, where I'm accountable to these guys for every single area of my life, not just recovery, not what I'm doing with recovery, but what I'm doing in my family life, what I'm doing in my work life. Am I being honest in every single area of my life? I can see stuff in you that's wrong. I can take your inventory real quick, tell you what you're doing wrong. but I can't always see it in me. That's another thing that's changed my life. Here's current experience. I This weekend I went and moved my daughter into Charlotte, into a place in Charlotte, and we came back and had a good evening, and I was happy to be there. I wasn't trying to get done with it to be on to what I wanted to do. I spent Sunday with my mother-in-law, who's 83. We just moved her into assisted living, and I sat there comfortable in my skin, not trying to get done with that to go do what I wanted to do like I did for so long in sobriety. My wife and I went to Cracker Barrel at 8:30. It's about to close. Are y'all familiar with Cracker Barrel? Do they have those? So we get in there, and it's, there's only 2 people and 3 people in the restaurant, maybe, or 3 tables, and there's nobody at the host station. And here's how I think. Where the hell are they at? It's not time to close. I'm aggravated, right? So the little girl comes finally, and she sits us down, and I walk in, and when I look over there and I see this kid, he's probably 23-year-old black kid, his pants are hanging off his ass down here, and he's got a telephone up to his ear. And I'm judging, right? So I sit down, I don't have my glasses, so I go back out to the car. And when I'm coming back in with my glasses, he blows by me, and he's got a look on his face like, and he said, "Excuse me, sir." And I said, "Go on." He comes walking in about 3 minutes later, and he's holding this little boy. He's got his son, and his legs are draped over him, and you can see the love in his face for this kid. And I'm sitting there thinking, God, how wrong you are. And my wife looks at me and she says, "What's going on with you?" And I said, "I don't know. There's something with this kid, right?" And a couple more minutes later, I'm getting this conviction. I can't describe it any other way than to maybe help him. And I mean, my wife's looking at me, and she probably thinks I'm crazy, and I don't know what's going on. But all of a sudden, she says, "You're going to give this kid some money, aren't you?" And I bust out sobbing. I'm just crying. And I said, "Yeah, I think I am." And so we get done with dinner, and I go find him in the kitchen, and he comes out, and I tell him, I said, "I don't know what's going on, dude. I don't have any idea, but I feel like God's leading me to give you this money." And he starts crying and sobbing, and I'm crying and sobbing, and he's hugging me in the middle of the damn Cracker Barrel. And this is a guy that would never do this, and I typically don't. I don't know. It's just God moves in my life today. And that feeling that I had when that happened, this is the first time I've gotten through telling this story in 3 days without just bawling, is something that I don't have anything to do with. I just get the hell out of the way. And when I do what I think God wants me to do, he puts people in my life to be of service to. I've been changed. I'm different than I used to be, and I didn't have a whole lot to do with it. One of the things that Dave sent me, and believe me, I'm not making Dave Fredrickson out to be some kind of saint. He's just like me, and so are all these other guys that are these circuit speakers that I used to put on pedestals. He sent me a thing about 8 months ago, that's probably the most profound thing I've ever heard in Alcoholics Anonymous. The magic you're missing is in the work you're avoiding. Every single time for me, whether it be recovery, whether it be my work life, my family life. And I got to ask myself, where am I at in the circle and the triangle? You know, where am I at with doing my step work? Where am I at with this list of amends that I started off with about 70 and I'm whittled it down to about 20? Am I putting those things off? Because I can do that. I will put it off and not do it until I become so uncomfortable that I've got to do something. And a lot of that comes out in steel on steel. Where am I at with unity? And you know, I thought for the longest time that unity was meetings. It was just meetings, and I know today that it's not. Unity is about a network of men who I tell everything to in Alcoholics Anonymous. I got to be honest, completely 100% honest. I can't tell a lie and know it and not fix it. Little example of that is about a year and a half ago, we're outside of, well, I'm at my men's meeting on Thursday night, and I'm connected. I'm talking to newcomers. I'm working with a lot of guys, and the next morning I wake up, I get into my prayer, meditation, and vision, and I am off. I mean, just completely off the beam. Something's not wrong inside. It's not happening, and it got so bad that I called Dave and I said, dude, what's going on? And he said, well, do a post-mortem on it. And this is one of the things we do. When we're off the beam, we'll go back and look at the last time we were connected to God. From then until now, what's happened? And I went back through where I was at that meeting and connected to God, in recovery, spiritual high, come outside. I'm talking to 4 or 5 guys, and I realized that I've, in that cutting up conversation, I told one of these little white lies that I've told all my life. And I knew it when I did it, but I wasn't going to tell anybody then. So that's where the disconnection came. So I get to go now and tell all 5 of these guys that are my network guys that I lied to them last night. And 4 of them laughed at me, and one of the guys didn't say anything. And I said, what's going on, dude? Did you hear me? And he said, yeah, I heard you. He said, I just did the same thing with my boss not 5 minutes ago. Now I've got to go fix it. And that's one of the ways that I think God uses defects of character to be of service to other people in my life. I've seen it happen a lot of times. The other thing is service work. You know, this intensive work with other alcoholics. It's something that I never did before and something that I can't get enough of now. I sponsor, I don't know how many people I sponsor. It's a lot of people, and I love doing it. It's my whole life has changed. It's like that part in the 12 and 12 where it talks about I've been given a new purpose. You know, it's I'm able to do something, think, feel, all of these things that I could never do before. And like I said earlier, that's not just not drinking. That's caring about other people. I genuinely care about other people today. And that's not something I did. That's just kind of something that happened as a result of doing this work. And so I'm just so committed to it. You know, it's changed my life, and it's what I do today. And I hope I'll always do it, because I can't. I talked about that internal discomfort earlier that I lived with for so long sober. Today I know that my emotional sobriety is directly relatable to my physical sobriety. If I stay in that state of agitation long enough, I'll drink again and I'll use. Hell, let me not do this for 3 days and I'm a candidate for a padded room today. Really, in here, in here. I just can't take it anymore. So I get it. What a lot of old timers said a long time ago, as you go on with this thing, the road gets narrower and narrower. I understand that today. So, but it's really not hard. It's the biggest joy in my life to do, not this speaking stuff. I don't like this very much, but to work with other people in AA and to stay clean, to get clean and stay clean. And I'm not talking about physically. I'm talking about in here and in here. And it's just the most important thing in my life. So I think that's enough of my stuff. Thank y'all so much for having me.